Day 3 of the November-December 97 7-day retreat in Springwater. Yesterday's talk evoked quite a few responses from people. Particularly the words to the effect, just being with the feelings, the emotions, the sensations is not enough. What is the root of it all? And is there anything beyond the root of thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, conflicts, memories, and so forth? We have talked so much and gone so much into just being with the fear or the anger, really minutely attending to all the facets of it. Including, if it's possible, awareness of the thought that aroused the fear, that triggered the anger, the hurt, and the anger or fear generating more thoughts. It's so important to really be intimate with these processes, which happens so quickly, so automatically, so unconsciously often, unawares, let's say. One may not be unconscious, but not completely aware of it all. And to give attention to this. Which brings intimacy with oneself and one's fellow human beings. Because the same processes operate for all of us. There's nothing idiosyncratic about it. A thought about what happened or the word somebody speaks. One feels attacked and the anger arising and hovering around at the memory of it. Somebody brought that up. It's as though it was cemented. This anger, hurt, fear complex. Cemented by memory. And maybe reluctance to let it go. Because here's something more to pay attention to. Is one identified with the anger? Is my hurt? Part of me, and therefore held on to, protected, as though it was a finger or a toe or an organ. I receive a lot of publications from different centers or spiritual publications, may not be associated with a center. And so much is there about being with the feelings, being one with them, not dividing, not separate from them. And if one looks into New Age journals, they're full of it. Is there a growing identification with the being one with one's feelings? This is me now, my ability, my duty, or my process. And what was said yesterday was that, all right, it's very, very significant, this in-touchness, this intimacy with all of these processes and their self-identification. But what is at the root of it all? Why does fear arise or anger stir or explode? Why does hurt happen again and again and again and is carried as a memory, maybe as a grudge? Thoughts arising about that person who hurt me. I can't be with them anymore. Where does it all come from? This is what we meant by asking for the root. And I don't mean, where does it come from historically, chronologically, psychoanalytically? This has been a great endeavor and a great revelation when it first started evolving here, to trace our present reactions, habits, compulsions, to early happenings in our infancy. Not asking for engagement in that, in asking where does it come from? Because no matter what happened in the past, something is arising and triggered right now and open to inspection. Because in the course of this work, when there is a real genuine interest in finding out about oneself, which often comes from feeling burdened by one's habits, which wreak havoc in one's life and in one's relationship with others, a real urgency and interest to find out more about it, things do become transparent, more and more transparent. Provided the activities, the reactivities are not shielded by image of what I want to believe and continue to believe that I am. I want to believe that I'm not an angry person, I'm not a controlling person, I'm not this or that, but I am open. And it's more the other people who have those characteristics. This is our way of negotiating our relationships. Very often, most of the time, we have to find out. Projecting onto others what cannot be faced openly in oneself, and it cannot be faced because an image is in the way of how I am. I'm not like that, heaven forbid. And again, chronologically, we've been trained, be like this is good, this is bad, and the good was rewarded, and the bad was punished. So this installs these images with their defenses. And we're interested in this right now because there's a real urgency, a desire for change, and yet we don't know how to bring it about. And somebody says, don't try to bring about the change, but watch and have insight into what is actually happening. Not with an eye out for change around the corner, but all eyes here, all eyes and ears to what is happening. The image is shielding or seemingly shielding the view of how we react. And it needn't happen. Because the reaction is so real right now. Why blur it with an image of how I ought to be? It's not necessary. Nobody's going to punish us. We can do this work if we're very, very private about it. And in the beginning, a lot of us are very private about it, don't want to blurt it out into public. So then let's just view it within. then it may be easier to let go of the imagery and be so stark, bare, honest with oneself, about oneself. So, this is all this thing of being with the feelings, but it already goes a little bit deeper, asking, where did this come from? Right now, still stirring, still generating more thoughts and images. As one person pointed out yesterday in a meeting, an event may have happened days ago or weeks or months or years ago, and it hasn't loosened yet, hasn't dissolved. Why? Why not? To watch it. To watch it lovingly, if you will, not threateningly. What is there threatening about revealing what happens in a human being? It's not threatening if thought doesn't sit right there saying, this is me. If thought says, this is me, then we have to deal with all the imagery about myself, which is all right. It needs to be dealt with because it's false. We are not our images. Are we? Can we see images for images? And notice to our amazement for how true we have taken the image of myself or the series of images of myself to be. And beginning to doubt this truth about the images. That I'm this, that I'm that. So, if we're not to believe the images about ourselves, what are we to believe? People begin to feel shaky, fear seeping through the cracks. What am I, if not what I have believed in, what I have held on to, what has given me security? Feeling of self-importance, to which the body has become hooked. Body is very hooked to the sensations arising from imagery. That's why we get the jitters if an image is questioned or shattered. It's the provider of satisfaction or positive energies has been shattered. Where am I going to draw my energies from? Well, we don't quite put it this way, but right now we're putting it this way. When this fear arises, it's a good sign. It's a crack in the cement. And again, not to believe that the fear, there's something dangerous here, is telling us the truth. It is not. It's not at all dangerous for the cement walls of self-imaging and self-referencing to crack, to let in some light, some fresh air, albeit fear bubbling up at the same time. What am I, if not this? This is the healthiest question anyone could ask. If one can really hear the question, what am I, if not all that I have believed in, all that I have identified with? And of course, it's not just self-images, self-story. It includes a lot more. My family, my profession, my talents, my country, my knowledge, my books, possessions, or my non-possessions. We can identify with that too. in this wall and afraid. Afraid of what? See, one can say, okay, just be with the fear. Feel it, how it contracts the stomach and pounds the heart or feels uncomfortable in the intestines. But we need to ask further. Why afraid of the prospect of not being any of this? Why? Are we asking right now? I'm asking too. I don't have this thing prepared and laid out. It's evolving. Why are we afraid? Or why is there fear? The language constantly reinforces this self thing. Why is there fear? At the realization that this is just imagery, just identification with ideas, which has held the self-feeling together in place. And allow this fear to lead the way to its root. What is the root of this fear? Or anger, jealousy, envy, all of these, what we call negative emotions, or desire for pleasure. And we're not condemning anything. It may sound like this because in a hall, somebody's sitting a little bit higher because she can't sit on the floor anymore. So is this a sermon coming at me? Words may not spell it out, but there may be that feeling. I'm already being condemned here for being selfish, self-centered, for having desires or fears. It's not at all the case. Let's not hear it this way. Hear it as an invitation to look at what goes on in every human being on the face of this earth. Identifying with oneself or one's tribe or country, one's spiritual community, one's gods or goddesses. And fearing to lose it all. And then what? So, question comes up again. What am I without all identification? Is it a legitimate question? First answer that comes up is, I don't know what I am. The brain is scanning for an answer. Maybe I'm this, maybe I'm that. Maybe I'm the whole, I'm the all, the absolute. But these are all concepts, aren't they? I don't know, is that a concept or is that a fact? That when the brain is at a loss of supplying answers, or when the answers that the brain supplies are not bought into, then what's left is, I don't know. Is it easier to watch the movements and habits of self-identification out of a state of not knowing? Out of a space of darkness of not knowing. And yet, amazingly, it throws light on all these knowing habits. I am this, I am that, and questions them. So, is identification with myself as this, that, or all of this and more of that, is identification with that the root of our fears and anger? Because I may lose it. Somebody will take it from me. not leave me enough. Is that the root of all of our fears? A identification with myself as something, somebody, with all their possessions, mental, spiritual, material possessions. And inevitably the fear of being robbed, lost, identification with my ways, which are not to be interfered with. If they're interfered with, there's anger. Because it's identification, holding on to my ways, and you can't mess with them. Because I'm right, and you're wrong. I'm putting it very starkly. Maybe a little bit nicer than that, but basically it's that, isn't it? When we get angry, somebody tells us to do something. Who are you to tell me? And why do we feel this way? Because we are identified with an image of what we are and what you are. We're not condemning, we're just looking. Not criticizing, not saying it shouldn't be so. We're bringing to light, bright sunlight, what is operating in human beings like you and me, darkly, unconsciously, painfully, sorrowfully. Somebody came to a meeting yesterday and said, when you talked about that the goal of this work is to find out the truth about myself, I cringed, the person. I sort of cringed. Because here's something else now to go after, the truth about myself. Dangerous territory, which I've walked for years and years. Isn't it rather, the person continued, isn't it rather that to discover the untruth about myself? Yes, I go along with that. It's a good way of putting it. See all the untruths about ourselves, and there's the truth. In the seeing, in the unraveling, in discerning what is false, that I'm not imagery and identification. And in the open, bare seeing, a false image may dissolve, seen as not needed, not just not needed, but in the way of a fluid acting and being. So at such a moment, it's not necessary to annihilate it, overcome it. So people often mention if fear arises, I may be annihilated in this process. And those words, I hope, have not been heard in this hall here. Don't talk about annihilation. Although I just read about it again in an excellent article in many respects, but that the self needs to be annihilated. Who's the annihilator? And I'm quite sure that the author didn't mean that there is me, the annihilator. But we have to be so careful with these words, because if sufficient fear arises, then there's a sort of a wall again. I don't want to look any further, because this body-mind just goes so far in exposing itself to fear or depression. And it says, whoa, no more. Can't take it. And it may be a healthy reaction, preventing some breakdown. But it may also fear a breakdown that is not going to happen. So that's why we're so careful in the use of words and pointing out time and time again, this is not a matter of condemnation or blame. We're not on a fault-finding mission, but exposing what ties us all into knots, alone and with each other. Exposing it and let the awareness do its own thing, which amazingly happens as there's wisdom and compassion and awareness. Which is not mine or yours. It operates when the untruths about ourselves are exposed. Gently, not with a sword to cut it. Awareness is not a sword, is it? Or maybe one visualizes it or verbalizes it that way due to one's conditioning or preponderance for metaphors. I don't feel awareness that way. It's just space and light and love and wisdom. Exposing what holds us in bondage and exposing the attachment to this bondage. Amazing. And something is not seen for what it is. Very likely it's attached to. We like to collect things. And of course, habit. Habit of proceeding, reacting, living in a certain way, and the innate inertia of material masses. There's an inertia not to change, to move on in the same direction or not move at all if one is already sitting still. I don't mean meditating. Immobile. To persevere in the immobility or persevere in the direction one is going. There's a great resistance in human being and physical masses. I'm not likening them, although we are all of the same stuff fundamentally. A great innate tendency to be inert. The Buddhists call it sloth and torpor. Very descriptive, loaded words. But they describe something, don't they? If one doesn't use them to beat oneself, but rather to mirror oneself. So, habit, a very, very powerful force in our lives. And the attachment to habit and feeling secure with habit, even if it is an unhappy habit, a sorrowful habit. Once we have identified with being a sorrowful person, don't want to give that one up either. A sufferer. Very widespread identity, the sufferer or the victim. And just listen to oneself, narrating to oneself stories about one's victimization. What one has to suffer at the hands of others, at the hands of conditions. And by telling this story, illustrated, colorful to oneself, one begins to live in that story far removed from what actually happened. What was the event really by which one felt victimized before getting lost in the story about it? Let's look at it freshly and take into consideration the other person who seems to have been the perpetrator, the victimizer. And do we have any openness left to feel our way into that person? Where were they coming from? What were they speaking out of? To whom were they talking? And enclose it all in an arena of light. So where are we? Clock says 11:09 and 13 seconds. Sun shining brightly and warming. The mind and heart, are they open? Open to receive, to look, to be? Or are they closed or cramped? Then let's look at it freshly. Listen to it. And wonder about the root of it all. And what's beyond that? Right now, a dialogue from the Zen tradition comes to mind. A wise Indian entering China to bring the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha teaching, to China. Having an audience with the emperor, and the emperor asks him, "Who are you?" Asks him, "Who are you?" And Bodhidharma, that was his name supposedly, responds, "I don't know." And the emperor says, maybe a little irritated, "What do you mean you don't know? Aren't you a holy man?" And the response comes, "Vast emptiness and nothing that can be called holy." Which the emperor didn't understand, so the man left. Without turning around, it says. He wasn't very patient. Expect everybody to understand just like that. Maybe he perceived more things about the palace that aren't documented. We will end here for today.